Kris Bryant quickly established himself as a superstar in Major League Baseball. He won Rookie of the Year in 2015, MVP in 2016, and when you couple that with a World Series ring, his first 2 years in Major League Baseball were a resounding success. Bryant's early successes were a great sign for Cubs fans, but were marred in controversy as Bryant's relationship with the Cubs as a rookie really started to falter, and litigation leading all the way up until the year before he was traded lingered on during his playing time with the Chicago Cubs. The battle between one of baseball's brightest young stars and one of MLB's most storied franchises called ripple effects now almost a decade after these events occurred and have changed baseball as a whole for the better. Although there have been many changes made in regards to service time manipulation, and thanks to the Kris Bryant Cubs situation, there's still a lot more that can be done and will be done on the horizon and will create a very interesting landscape for Major League Baseball going forward. Before we begin, it would really mean a lot if you could subscribe to the channel. It's the easiest way to go ahead and help out a channel grow, and will get you more baseball content not only from me, but from awesome creators out there as well. Without further ado, let's dive into exactly how the Kris Bryant Cubs saga shaped Major League Baseball forever. Before we begin, we have to set the scene a little bit. Bryant was the second overall pick in the 2013 MLB draft out of San Diego State and signed for just over $6.7 million, which was the highest bonus slot for that draft. In 2014, his first full year of minor league baseball, he won the Minor League Player of the Year from both Baseball America and USA Today and reached as high as AAA. That following spring training in 2015, he completely tore up the Cactus League, hitting for a .425 batting average, 15 RBIs, and led the entire league with 9 home runs that spring. At 23 years old, he looked primed to be MLB's next superstar, but he didn't make the Cubs opening day roster. Cubs president Theo Epstein said that he wanted Bryant to go ahead and get in a good rhythm defensively before making his Major League debut, and therefore that was why he got sent down to AAA to start the year. However, it made very little sense, as Bryant won the AAA International League's Best Defensive Third Baseman as part of Baseball America's Best Tool Survey, which was voted on by league managers. And in 2015, he had a 1.3 ultimate zone rating at third base in the major leagues, showing that he was fine defensively, above average. The first 2 years of StatCast data as well support this, as in 2016 and 2017, his second and third years in Major League Baseball, he was above average in both outs above average and fielding run value at third base. So who did the Cubs decide to start instead? Mike Olt, who had a 160 batting average and a 66 OPS plus the year prior and didn't even finish the year with the team. Even more confusing was that the Cubs were ready to make a huge push into October, as they had signed John Lester, traded for Dexter Fowler, and also acquired Jason Hamill, David Ross, and stole Joel Madden from the Tampa Bay Rays. With all of those factors in play, it's certainly questionable as to why you would even send someone who would be an immediate benefit to your team down to AAA, especially because they just called him up 15 days after the league year started, and he wasn't sent back down and won Rookie of the Year that year. This was a definitely questionable decision, but there's a lot of other things that go into the mechanics of why Kris Bryant got sent down, and it all comes down to service time manipulation. Service time manipulation is a complicated concept, but it's very important in the way that a lot of teams operate even today. When a player is on the active 26-man roster or on the injured list, you are in service time during the season. 1 day is equal to 1 day. The MLB league year is 187 days per season, and 1 full year is counted as 172 days, which is exactly 2 weeks less than the full year of service time. When the Cubs called up Bryant just 15 days into the league year, the most amount he could accumulate in service time that year was 171 days, and with the way MLB contracts worked, this delayed Bryant's free agency by 1 year, giving the Chicago Cubs an extra full season of team control and giving less money to Kris Bryant in the long run because of it. Although the free agency system is complicated and caveats exist, a player's pre-free agency role can be simplified down pretty easily. Once a player crosses that 172 days of service time, they basically start a 6-year clock, starting with the season that they cross that threshold. The first 3 years, the player is basically paid league minimum, which currently is $740,000, but back when Bryant was a rookie in 2015, it was $570,000. The next 3 years, after that first initial 3, the team and the players come up with a salary number, and they either agree with one of those salary numbers, or they get sent to arbitration, where they will basically go to court and fight over one of those 2 numbers, and an independent third-party arbitrator will go ahead and pick one of them. There's no averaging. The arbitrator either picks the team's number or the player's number, and oftentimes this can really fracture relationships between teams and players, as the team's representative often throw any reason they can to go ahead and get the lower number, which involve really defiling a player's abilities on the field and their status as a person. This is most notably with Corbin Burns recently with the Milwaukee Brewers, where he said a lot of his relationship with the Brewers was hampered because of the arbitration process and how that was handled by the team. Generally, the arbitration process is a good thing for players. That's how Bryant increased his salary by over 1,000% between 2017 and 2018, and between his first year and his final year of team control, his salary was over 38 times higher than when it started at $507.5 thousand back in 2015. After 3 years of arbitration, a player generally becomes a free agent and can sign with any team that they would like. This is exactly what happened with Bryant, but because of service time manipulation, he wasn't able to cross that 172 threshold his first year, where he won Rookie of the Year and was one of the best players on the Chicago Cubs. Instead, that started in his second year, in the first game he played, and the Cubs got to keep him a full extra year because of it. At the end of the 2015 season, Bryant filed a grievance against the Cubs to get to free agency 1 year sooner, but was denied nearly 5 years later in 2020 and created what was known as the Bryant Rule. No arbitrator would rule in favor of Bryant, as there was no rules against service time manipulation in Major League Baseball, and therefore, the Cubs really did nothing wrong. This is a big issue, as hitting free agency earlier gives players a lot more money. You're 1 year younger, and generally teams value youth when going ahead and signing a contract. That's why players like Andrew McCutchen aren't going to get huge deals. Bryant did sign a nice 7-year, $188 million contract with the Rockies. That hasn't gone super well and has hurt his public perception a little bit. But if he hit free agency a year earlier, he probably would have made a little more money, and for Bryant, that's a big deal. Yes, $188 million is a lot of money, but at the end of the day, if you can make more money for your family, I can't fault someone for going for that. In their situation, I would do the same thing, and I think most people would as well. Bryant's situation was without a doubt one of the most publicized and probably the most prominent case of service time manipulation, and was the catalyst for many changes that have come now currently in Major League Baseball, but he is far and away the first and not the last player to have undergone this situation. In 2014, George Springer rejected a 7-year, $23 million contract with the Houston Astros, and as punishment, they demoted him to start the 2014 season, and he accrued just 166 days of service time, which fully delayed his free agency by a year. Since the Astros wanted to keep him on a short, cheap deal, and he rejected it for his own financial benefit, they punished him, and now they kept him for a full year, delaying his arbitration so he can make more money. That same year as Bryant, in 2015, Byron Buxton started the year in AAA before being called up, and in 2018, Twins GM Thad Levine said that service time played a role in why Buxton didn't get called up because of service time, and that was a big issue. Bryant's not even the only Rookie of the Year to have his service time manipulated. Evan Longoria in 2008 with the Rays, Ronald Acuna Jr. with the Braves in 2018, and Carlos Correa once again with the Astros in 2015 are just some examples of players who have came up later so the team could have an extra year of team control. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who was the #1 prospect in baseball in 2019, is another great example, and unfortunately, it doesn't just stop when the pandemic hit. In 2021, Mariners president Kevin Mather suggested that top prospects Logan Gilbert and Jared Kelenic were not ready for the major leagues simply because they wanted an extra year of team control, and the very next day, Mather was fired for his comments. And although there have been some calls that this is what the Orioles and Pirates were doing with Jackson Holliday and Paul Skeens respectively, there were valid reasons for each. Holliday has shown that maybe he wasn't ready for the major league level in his performance so far with the Orioles, and Paul Skeens only had 6 2/3 innings pitched in the minor leagues under his belt before 2024, which is a valid reason to not immediately call someone up. Major League Baseball's Player Association knew there needed to be a solution to this epidemic, especially as more teams look for ways to cut costs instead of putting together a championship-winning team. Heading into the 2022 MLB season after the lockout, the work of Bryant both before and after his grievance, along with all the other players who had their service time manipulated, finally paid off as MLB and the Players Association agreed on a new collective bargaining agreement, or CBA, which introduced the Prospect Promotion Incentive, or PPI, which was a way to dissuade teams from manipulating service time on top prospects. PPI eligible players can go ahead and hit free agency earlier if they did not have service time requirements met for a full season, and it will also allow a team to get a top draft pick if a player does meet PPI eligibility. This is a huge deal as teams can now go ahead and bolster their farm system with oftentimes a top 30 pick in the MLB draft, while players are able to go ahead and make more money for being excellent in their first couple years in Major League Baseball. There are 3 ways that a player can go ahead and qualify for PPI for them and their team. The first is to win Rookie of the Year in their first year, or finishing top 3 in either MVP or Cy Young voting before hitting arbitration, which is generally a player's first 3 years. If they have not already acquired a full year of service time, they will get one for their first full year. So in this instance, if Bryant winning Rookie of the Year happened in 2015 and this was implemented, he would have gotten a full year of service, allowing him to hit free agency earlier. It would have made him, Longoria, Acuna, Correa, Bryce Harper, so many players hit free agency a year earlier, guaranteeing them more money in most cases. Teams will also go ahead and receive a compensation pick at the end of the first round of the MLB draft for each player that acquires PPI status. This happened last year with Julio Rodriguez winning Rookie of the Year for the Mariners. They got pick number 29, and they picked Johnny Farmello, a high school outfielder who right now is 19 with an 819 OPS at Modesto, which is single A, but he tore his ACL 2 weeks ago when he was right on the verge of probably becoming a top 100 prospect on a lot of lists. This year, thanks to the contributions of Corbin Carroll and Gunnar Henderson winning Rookie of the Year, the Diamondbacks and Orioles will pick number 31 and 32 in the MLB draft. And with the way the MLB draft works, where there's slot bonuses and you can go over and under slot and great players aren't always the ones picked, this could be a huge impact on a team looking to grab a top player in a later round who demands a little bit more money than what their slot allocates. Once you receive a PPI pick from a player, you can't receive another. So, for example, the Orioles can't get one if Gunnar Henderson finishes top 3 in MVP voting this year, which with the way he's going looks likely, but the Royals can with Bobby Witt Jr. this year if he finishes top 3 because he was second place in Rookie of the Year voting in 2022. The CBA also introduced a bonus pool worth $50 million a year, split up to the top 100 pre-arbitration players, allowing players who have great stats and have winning awards to get more money than they would just with the general base salary rate. The top players in that top 100 could earn multiple millions of dollars, up to $4+ million more than their base salary. Although the CBA and PPI definitely had some big wins for the players, there were some issues and drawbacks that do come up still with PPI. Not everyone can be a PPI eligible player. It involves being a top prospect, which is defined as being a top 100 prospect by 2 of Baseball America, MLB Pipeline, or ESPN. This would be fine, but there are some differences in how these 3 rankings go ahead and classify a prospect. Major League Baseball, and therefore MLB Pipeline, uses a service time limit where after 45 days of service time, a player is officially marked as having that being their rookie year. However, ESPN and Baseball America use an inning pitched and at-bat limit, which can cause inconsistencies between the 2 lists. The best example of this is Aaron Ashby, a pitcher who is in the Brewers organization and went into 2022 with 46 days of service time but just 31 2/3 innings pitched in his career. Generally, the innings cutoff is 50 innings pitched in the major leagues, so he was eligible for Baseball America and ESPN's rankings, where he was ranked on their top 100, but was ineligible for MLB Pipelines and therefore PPIs because he had already crossed the 45 days of service time. This is a huge inconsistency, and it's not fair to the players ranked 101st or 102nd who would be on these Baseball America or ESPN top 100 lists but aren't because of players like Aaron Ashby. Ashby did nothing wrong, it's just these inconsistencies make it difficult for PPI to go ahead and apply to a ton of players. And this is true, over the past 2 seasons there are less than 10 players who have qualified for PPI each year. Signing long-term extensions can also disqualify you. Players like Colt Keith and Jason Chourio, who both signed long-term deals before these seasons, buying out their rookie minimum and arbitration years, both aren't eligible for PPI because they do not have arbitration years left. This could be interesting as players like Jason Chourio are currently looking like they have a decent shot of winning Rookie of the Year. Granted, there's a lot of time left, we'll see how that goes in the rest of the season, but he's not eligible to give the Brewers a compensation pick because he already signed a long-term deal. If a player has been traded after making their major league debut but before they accrue enough service time to meet eligibility, they are also ineligible. This rules out Joey Ortiz, who was acquired by the Brewers in the Corbin Burnes deal, and Michael Busch, who was acquired by the Cubs this offseason. This rules out 4 players who have the potential to potentially make a big impact at the major league level, and maybe even win one of these awards, are now ineligible simply for a rule stipulation. So has PPI been working? Has the work that players like Kris Bryant and others actually paid off? Michael Bauman over at Fangraphs did a lot of this work for me, and I'll link his article in the description below. He looked at this before the 2023 season, and he noted that despite the small sample size, things looked promising. It seemed like players weren't having their service time manipulated, and teams valued having them up in the major league sooner rather than later, which was a big step up from when the service time epidemic hit an all-time high in the late 2010s. More players who were MLB ready made their opening day rosters, and those who didn't were often hurt, looking at players like Logan O'Hoppe or Adley Rutschman, who weren't able to make their major league debut on opening day because of injury. Figuring out whether PPI is a success is a hard question to answer, but I think Jeff Passan said it best with his tweet. It's never going to go away. Service time manipulation is a valuable asset to teams. Keeping a player for a full another year is a huge benefit, but it's on the decline. Players are getting more major league action, fans are able to see top prospects in action sooner rather than later, and that's a great benefit to our game as a whole, to the players, to the fans, and hopefully even the owners at the end of the day. Thank you again for watching this video. There'll be 2 videos on your screen, hit them if you're interested, and please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. It's the easiest way to help me out. Thank you again for watching to the end, and I hope to see you in the next video.